All right, it's 12 o'clock on Wednesday. Happy day, everybody. Hump day, is I'm learning to call it. I'm actually in a short sleeve shirt here for the first time in, I don't know, maybe since August of last year. It seems like this weather it's been cold for a long time, but it's sunny out. It's rather warm, so we welcome it. It's not raining and windy, so glad to see that. Well, welcome back to the Songs of Hope Education Conference here. We are super excited for the lineup today. We've got with us right now Letty Rising, who is an incredible individual, and I'm very excited to hear from here at 12 o'clock. Then we have Elizabeth Campbell, and we have a Spanish session also by Rafa Roman at 1 o'clock as well. And if you're listening in here on Zoom, I'll put the chat in the chat engine, and if you're listening in on Facebook, I'll put the link there as well so that everyone that wants to be part of that Spanish session can switch over for that. So I'd like to provide an introduction for Letty. Very excited to have her on the call. I've known Letty, my wife and I have known her for about, I think, maybe the last 6 or 7 months. She came up to visit us and our schools in Cambridge a couple months ago before all this COVID-19 hit. Just an incredible individual, knowledgeable, and very passionate about education. So Letty has been involved in Montessori education for over 15 years. She earned her BA in sociology at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and obtained her state teaching credential through the California State University, San Marcos. She participated in AMS, or American Montessori Society training in Montessori, for ages 6 to 9 before earning her AMI, which is the American Montessori Institute, elementary diploma for 6 to 12, and her MED from Loyola University in Maryland. She's held positions as a homeschool education specialist, Montessori elementary teacher, school director, principal, Montessori coordinator, and consultant in several public and private Montessori school communities throughout the year. She's done it all. She currently runs a business conducting professional development, consulting, and mentoring for schools in the U.S. and worldwide with a small team of consultants, filling the role of education director and instructional coach for schools needing part-time, accessible support. So welcome, Letty. Extremely happy that you're on here, and I'll let you take it from here.
Hi there. Yes, it's funny you were talking about being worldwide. Many of us aren't worldwide right now. We're stuck in our homes. So I probably need to revise my bio for the moment, but hopefully we're going to be going back out into the world again. So anyway, so today, when Chris approached me and said they were doing a Songs of Hope, and I was thinking a lot about, hope for the families these days, because this is a really hard time that everybody's going through. Unprecedented is the popular word that people are using these days. And I, thought, what would parents or teachers really want to know most right now? And, I run a Facebook group for parents who are temporarily homeschooling their children. And the biggest thing that comes up is, I don't know how to interact with my child in a way that engenders cooperation. And, parents are feeling a little hopeless right now because there isn't a lot of guidance and support because, they're used to sharing this partnership with the teachers and the school, but right now, that partnership is changed. And so it's now more on the parent to be doing things that they're not accustomed to doing. And there's just a lot of power struggles at home. There's crying, there's tears, there's tantrums. So today I wanted to talk about especially some effective communication patterns that parents and children can use together that will help them get along better. The way that we speak with children has a lot to do with how they behave. And I would say our communication patterns are 80% of it. And being a head of school for many years and a consultant in schools, I was able to observe classrooms a lot and analyze communication patterns between teachers and children. And I came up with a lot of interesting findings over the years that have proven to be pretty insightful and helpful, and I wanted to share those with you guys today. So before we go into that, I wanted to share a couple of quotes. There's a woman named Peggy O'Mara, who is a publisher of Mothering magazine years ago. And, she has a quote, which is, "The way we talk to children becomes their inner voice." So, right now, parents are not talking to their children always in the way that they would like to, because they're stressed right now. I mean, parents are going through so much. They're doing triple duty as they're the parent. They are probably working their full-time job at home. And if not, then they're really worried about, their bills, and they're struggling because they were laid off and they're on unemployment or furloughed. And they're being a teacher to their children too. So they're doing triple duty. So the way we talk to the children is something that kind of falls to the wayside when we are in a place where we're in survival mode. So, before I even go into all of this, I do want to kind of have everybody have a moment to reflect on some self-compassion for yourself, because, you are going to make mistakes, and you're going to lose your cool with your children a little more than usual right now. And also just, as long as you can apologize and repair and try to not do it too often. Children are resilient. So if we lose it every once in a while, our patience, it's okay, so don't be too down on yourself. If you don't, utilize the tools of effective communication perfectly right now, because it's just not going to happen. So anyway, today's talk mostly is going to be building stronger connections with children, especially in regards to communication. So another quote I wanted to share before we got into this is, there's a man named John Gottman, and he does all these studies on marriage, actually. Relationships. He hooks people up to electrodes, and does all this sort of like monitoring their heart rate and their breathing and all this stuff. And he has found through his scientific investigations that in order for a marriage, or any relationship for that matter, to be successful, you need to have 5 positives to 1 negative, at least. So you can have 10 positives to 1 negative, but that is a really kind of a scary proposition in a way, because if you are, either say something negative to your child or have some sort of a negative interaction, if you have a couple of those, that means you need to sort of make it up with like 10 more positive interactions. And it doesn't have to be always positive words, like we always think about that, but it can also be, a gesture like touching a shoulder or a smile. Those are positive interactions. So 5 positives to 1 negative to have a successful relationship. So one thing that it's important to think about if you're a teacher in a classroom, or if you're a parent and you're under a lot of stress, the thing is that we tend to revert to going into the negative, because you have to be very conscious to stay in the positive place. And so we're going to kind of talk about different ways that people are communicating with each other and trying to stay in that place as much as possible. So when we're talking with children, we're pretty much using one of 5 different ways of speaking to children, 5 different statements. We are using positive statements, like you're like, "Oh, I really love the colors you chose for your painting. Those are my favorite colors too." You are saying a negative statement, like, "Stop acting like a baby." Hopefully you're not doing that too much, but it happens. There are also neutral statements like, "Oh, I see that you're wearing a yellow shirt today." And that's not positive or negative. It's just a noticing. It's an observation. You are saying a directive. "Please put your dish in the sink, clean up your room, push in your chair, finish your dinner." So those are the directives. And then there are questions like, "Oh, well, what do we do before we have lunch?" Or, "Which shirt would you like to wear today?" So when I was in the classroom and watching classrooms and trying to make sure that there was a lot of harmony being established in the classroom, I noticed that the classrooms that had a lot of peacefulness and, ease and harmony in the environment were the classes where the teachers were largely using positive statements, neutral statements, and questions. And the classrooms where there was sort of disarray, a little chaos, it was not feeling quite right in there. The teachers were high in the directives. Even some negative statements sometimes, but usually teachers are pretty good about not doing that too often unless it's a really intense time. As a person who runs a school, if I had a teacher who was constantly doing negative statements, we would have to sit down and have a serious talk. So, luckily that's not seen as very, very often, but in the classes where there's a lot of struggle, there's a tendency to see a lot of directives being done. So the thing is that directive statements are not negative in and of themselves. I mean, we do have to tell people what to do every once in a while. But if you are only using directives all day long, they become negative statements for the children, and they will resist you. They will get into power struggles with you. So there are times when, as a teacher, I've gone into the classroom and I will actually say, okay, I'm going to just analyze your communication patterns for the next hour or two, and I'll mark down, every time you've issued one of these statements. Okay. And so the directive statements get really, interesting, because if it's a classroom where the teacher's doing that, I can be like, oh, in the last hour, you basically issued 14 directives, and there weren't really there was one positive statement, to balance that out. So, but that's not really balanced out. That's very imbalanced. So the thing is, though, is that when we get stressed, we go into directive mode, and that's actually what's happening. I guess you could say right now at home for a lot of people, because parents are stressed. They are trying to work at the same time while they're trying to help their children, and they're trying to, do their household stuff, and they have multiple children at home and maybe a spouse, and, there's just so much going on. So it's really gets to be pretty tricky, and it becomes a point of frustration. And so then the parents are often right now, parents are saying a lot of directives at home, and it's clean that up, do your homework right now, do your schoolwork. So, you have to stop and think, how many positive statements or interactions have I made today? And so let's give some examples of positive and neutral statements, because those are both good things to use. A positive statement, you could be I noticed I really enjoyed listening to you play the piano earlier. That is a beautiful new song that you've been practicing. Noticing statements are really good too. I call neutral statements are also noticing statements. I see that you really you were really enjoying playing with your sister today. You're noticing that. Just those little acknowledgments, oh, I noticed that you had a great time talking with your grandma on Zoom yesterday. It's just a little kind of a thing. And those things will create connections with the children, because everybody wants to be noticed. So if you are kind of noticing what they're doing and commenting on it, you will see less negative behavior, generally speaking. And because children get into attention-seeking behavior, and they can either go into positive attention or negative attention. And if they're not going to get the positive attention, then they will go for the negative. And a lot of times parents and teachers are not conscious of the fact that they are feeding into the negative attention cycle. So that's an important thing to think about. So you're also going to want to make sure that you are asking questions. So, you can turn directives into questions quite easily, actually. And there are a couple of good reasons to do this. One is, if you are in directive mode, then you you're going to just be constantly, then the kids are going to tune you out, basically. If you're like constantly directive, they're not going to really listen to that. But if you ask a question, they have to actually stop for a second, synthesize the question in their mind and formulate an answer. So they're going to be more likely to remember something. Like, instead of saying, go wash your hands, we're all going to be saying that a lot, actually, in the future years. You can instead say, what do we do before we have lunch? And they could be like, wash their hands. They have to sit and think for a minute, and you're like, yes. And so you didn't tell them what to do. They actually came to it themselves. So questions are very powerful, and using those often with positive statements and neutral statements, is good. Now, again, directives are not bad. And sometimes you're like, you need to, don't run in the street, and the car's coming or whatever. And even in the house, sometimes it's like, we need to get up and go to the store right now. It's time to go. There are times when you need to do it. But if you can minimize those, then the children are going to be responding to you more positively. They're not going to be fighting with you. They're not going to be getting into like little struggles with you. So the goal really is to eliminate the negative statements, minimize the directives, and increase your positive statements and your questions. So these are really important things to remember. Just be conscious of it when you're talking to your children at home. Like, oh, have I been telling them what to do all day long? And again, when we're stressed out, it's easy to just go into directive. And you have to really stop and make a conscious effort and connect with them. And other kinds of questions is just asking them, what is your favorite part of the book that you were reading earlier? Or, how is your friend Johnny doing, who you were talking to on Zoom earlier today? Asking them about their lives shows that you care about them. And then they're going to care about what you want, because they don't want to be thought of as a project. And if you are giving them directives all day long, that's not building a relationship. That's you. They see that you have an agenda to change their behavior, have you do what they want. And there's nothing that has to do with building a relationship in that. So, it's really nice to make sure that you are getting down and really connecting with the children by asking them, what's your favorite character in that cartoon that you love, and you may hate that cartoon, maybe you're wishing they weren't watching that cartoon, but you're like, okay, I'm working all day long. I'm going to let them watch TV for 6 hours a day. And I don't like that they're watching that cartoon, but it's like not that terrible. But, asking them what they care about is really important. And then they feel very cared about as well. So somebody was mentioning in the chat, see, I just have to tell you, I'm a little bit of not so good at going back and forth between the chat and me talking, because it's like multitasking in a way that I'm not good at yet, but I plan to get better at. But somebody was talking about that they were, giving their children praise and saying good job and whatnot, and so an interesting thing is that with Montessori people, we have like a very different view on praise, and it's also misunderstood. So I'm going to explain that a little bit. So there are two different kinds of praise, really. There's evaluative praise and there's descriptive praise. So Montessori schools want to get away from evaluative praise, because evaluative praise involves judgment, and we are making a judgment, and it also creates children who are looking for external rewards rather than internal rewards. And we really want them to have an intrinsic motivation in life. So examples of evaluative praise would be like, you are so smart, you're such a good girl, and even good job, because it's such a, universal thing that we've all been saying for a long time. And the things that I'm mentioning, actually, I just want to stop for a second and say, if you say good job sometimes, I still say it sometimes. Like, don't, feel like, oh my gosh, I said the wrong thing. It's not the worst thing in the world. There are just better things to say. So, evaluative praise, those are examples of evaluative praise when you're creating a judgment and an evaluation. And so and in contrast to that is descriptive praise, like, oh, I noticed that you really enjoyed solving that puzzle. Oh, I love the bright blue color that you used in your painting. Like, that's my favorite shade of blue. So, descriptive praise is kind of a little bit a mixture of positive statement and neutral statement. So there's a lot of noticing that goes on in descriptive praise. Like, so that kind of thing is noticing, and you're also being very specific about what you're noticing. And it's not about how the person is inside. It's about like, it's about who they are as a person, I guess, or you could say. It's about like, you're describing what you see. And so they're not gonna, if you go into you're so smart, you're such a good girl, that means you could be dumb and you could be a bad girl, and so there's like judgments around all of that. So you want to try to get away from that and just go into the, you used red and blue and green in your painting, wow, that sounds really amazing. So just you want to really be careful in how you do that. Another communication pattern that's really interesting to point out is if then versus when then. So when then is positive and it's more likely to engender cooperation. So let me actually back up for a second. So there's if then and there's a when then. So if then is if you don't do X, then you can't have Y. And when then is when you do X, then you can do Y. So examples of this could be like, if you don't put your lunch away, you can't go outside. I mean, I hear people say this all the time. Or you could say, when you put your lunch away, then you can go outside. So the first one the if then can be perceived as a threat, actually. And then you get into a power struggle. Oh, they're threatening me. If you don't do this, then this isn't going to happen. They're like, okay, let's bring it on, But if it is when then you're assuming that they're going to do it. You're basically like making the assumption it's going to happen. And also, there's no threat involved. It's just like, when this happens, then this can happen. It's very matter of fact, So it's very subtle, but if you sat and listened to an adult say to a child, if you don't put your lunch away, you can't go outside. That sounds very different than when you put your lunch away, then you can go outside. The second one is just not going to lead into a power struggle. Okay. Oh my gosh, there are like 5 million questions in the chat box, and I'm hoping that like people are keeping track of them for me so that I can like answer them later on. Cause I'm like, as I said, I'm going back and forth and going, there's so many and so many great comments too, actually. So anyway, if then also implies choice. Not only is it a threat, but it's like, okay, well, I guess I could or couldn't do it, and so maybe I'm not going to do it. So again, like that's a very subtle communication pattern that you want to change, and you're going to get so much more cooperation rather than resistance. Another way of, communication is like, there is something called nonviolent communication, which I have experience with and I have really enjoyed as a method myself. And it was developed by a man named Marshall Rosenberg, and he talks about observations, feelings, needs, and requests. So it's important for us to help the children develop this kind of language so that they are taking responsibility for their feelings and, talking and understanding how to say I feel and I want, and then articulating what that is. I actually was talking with a friend of mine the other day about her 5-year-old who has not learned how to develop this. He's always like, you do this and you do that. And he's always like kind of blaming. I mean, he's still young, he's 5.5, but we talked a lot about helping him shift from you do this and you do that to say, I feel and I want, so that he can learn to take responsibility for his own feelings. So when you're using using observations, feelings, needs, and requests, Instead of saying, "Oh, you're so disorganized, you never put away your things when you're finished, what's wrong with you?" So again, there's blaming, there's shaming, it's all externalized stuff. You want to take responsibility and say something like, I feel frustrated when you leave out your toys because it's important to me that the house feels peaceful and orderly. Please put your things away before you go outside. So interestingly enough, so many parents and teachers use like the first part. And so the first one I just said, you're so disorganized, you never put your things away, what's wrong with you? If you noticed that what's involved there is complaining at the child, and that leads to the children feeling like they're being complained at, they're being lectured, and that leads to them feeling shamed about things. And so there are so many people who are shaming children, but they're not actually trying to change the behavior. So it actually is a lose-lose proposition, because you are not getting what you want and the child isn't changing, but then the child is also developing a low self-esteem because they're hearing you complaining and lecture at them. In the second way, you're talking about, okay, I feel frustrated when you leave your toys out because it's important to me that the house is clean and peaceful and orderly. And then you are specific about your request. Please put your things away before you go outside. So that is the part that many teachers and parents forget. They might be like, oh, Johnny, why are you doing that? And, what's the problem? And like, they go into that part, but they don't go into, please stop. And this is not okay. And let's shift this into problem solving and like taking action. So you as the adult need to take action and follow through. Because if you just say, I don't like this, and there's no sort of like follow-up with that, like, can you please stop, or will you put this away, or you need to finish your breakfast before we get in the car because I don't want crumbs in my car, and like, you have to just be really specific about how you feel, and what you need, instead of like, oh, you're always bringing your food in the car and you're leaving crumbs everywhere, and oh my gosh. Like, there's a lot of people who will just kind of like, I'm tired of you always bringing your cereal in the car. But like, well, who's the parent here? Like, if you're tired of it, then you need to like take action and make it stop. But if you're just complaining at your child, it's just eroding their self-esteem, and you're not actually having anything happen. Nothing is changing from that. So another topic to talk about is conflict resolution. So many of the parents at home have children who have siblings, obviously, and the conflict is at an all-time high. So maybe your two children are at each other's throats a little bit when they're in the school day, but now they're with each other all day long. And I've been hearing parents saying that they're just worried they're going to kill each other. So there's a lot of like stress around that. So some of you might have only children at home and you don't have to worry about this as much. And then some of you who are teachers who are on this call, you're going to be dealing with conflict resolution all the time. So the thing is that when children have a conflict, you really need to teach them to go directly to the source. So they are talking to each other and you are facilitating. So there tends to be this thing where, and it starts in the preschool years, you might have like 2 4-year-olds come up to you and say, he took my toy, no, he did, and blah, blah, blah. And so then those two children are talking to the adult, and they are not looking at each other and they are not talking to each other. And the adult is standing there being the judge and the jury, trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong and solve the problem. That has been like the normal historical pattern that so many people deal with. But there's actually a better way. So instead, if the 2 4-year-olds come up to you and they're fighting over a toy or somebody took it or whatever, you can be like, okay, you guys need to talk to each other, and I'm here to support you, to help you find the words if you need the words. So you then become like a coach and a facilitator rather than the judge and the jury. So you want to make sure, like, you want to take yourself out of the equation and you want to help them look at each other. If you don't do that, you actually are teaching them to grow up and go straight to talk to the principal instead of the teacher if they're having a conflict with the teacher, or to go talk to their complain to their coworkers about their colleague when they really need to talk directly to their colleague. So we need to teach them from very early on to be talking directly to the source, and then they will grow up and hopefully do that too. So when I was running schools, we started this at the foundational level. It's like, okay, with the toddlers, tell them, if they, you tell them no, you tell them I don't like that, and I'm here for you, and you guys talk to each other. Like, we start young, 18 months, 2 years old, you can start this then. And then we're like, if a teacher comes to me and complains because they're upset that their colleague isn't cleaning up really nicely at the end of the day and they're leaving the classroom a mess or whatever, and it's like, okay, you need to go talk to them first and see if you can solve that. Do you want me to sit with you while you talk to that person? I can do that, but you guys are going to have that direct conversation. So you can start that young. Older children are going to, in like elementary age, are going to try to pull you into being the decider, the judge, the jury. They want to find out who's right and who's wrong. If they grow up not doing this, they're not going to be that way, but they definitely want you to be the decider. But you start even from the young ones, the toddler age, say, tell him you don't like that and let him know. Even like if I have to see two children, like one child is like grabbing something and the other child says, no, I don't like that. I don't run over there and say, oh, that's not okay, you shouldn't do that. I'll say, Johnny is sending a really clear message that he doesn't like that. That's what I'm hearing. Are you hearing that too? So you are basically amplifying the child's voice rather than using your own, going in there and dealing with it on your own. You're amplifying the child's voice. When the children are elementary or adolescent age, you can bring the conflicts to the group. You can say, there's been like a problem where some people have been feeling left out in the classroom. Girls, when they're 9, 10 years old, start kind of getting into cliques sometimes, and that can happen. And so you want to have a gathering together and brainstorm solutions with those children. It could be siblings that you're dealing with. It could at home. It could be you're a teacher in the classroom. Have them, let's say, okay, we're having this problem. How should we solve this problem? And elementary children are in their reasoning mind. They have developed their powers of imagination. And so they can really sit and think through those kinds of things. You can't really do that with the younger children as much, brainstorming solutions, because they aren't quite ready for that yet. But once they get to be even like 4 or 5 year olds can start doing that process. And then when they are talking, help them reframe by using I statements, so they're like, it might be like, okay, there's a problem. Some kids are feeling left out. Yeah. Sally is making me feel left out right now, and say, okay, let's stop and say, how do you feel? I feel sad because Sally is not talking to me and she's talking to Georgia instead. So really helping them kind of rethink about these kinds of things is important. Another thing that we want to think about when we're communicating with children is to validate their feelings and their emotions. So there's so many things that people say that they could maybe shift and do differently, and some of them are very popular things, okay? So there's a really popular one that you all probably say, or 90% of you say, and again, if you say it sometimes, it's not the worst thing in the world, but there are better things. So many times if a child is crying, a teacher will rush over and say, you're okay, you're okay. Well, I know when I'm crying, I'm not okay. Like, I am not okay when I'm crying. And so if an adult were to come over to me and I'm crying and they're like, you're okay, first of all, it's, I'm not okay. And second of all, you're teaching the child to think, oh, I'm crying, but they're telling me I'm okay. So they have to learn to mistrust what they're feeling inside, or they think they have to have the external person tell them how they feel. I can't tell you how many times I'll hear a parent or a teacher say, well, a child will say, I'm hungry. And the parent will say, you're not hungry, you just ate. Or the teacher or the child will say, I'm tired. You're not tired, you just took a nap, And so this is dismissing their feelings. This is not validating them. And, it's possible maybe that's the case. I don't know. Maybe they are, they're saying they're tired and they're not tired, but we need to trust and believe them. And there's nothing wrong with us trusting and believing them, So instead of saying like, you're okay to a crying child, you might want to try something like, oh, you're feeling sad because Jessica told you that she wanted to play with Sierra and not you, that would make me feel sad too. Like, do you want to find the words to talk with her, or do you want to play with somebody else, So instead of, if they're crying, saying, oh, it looks like you're feeling sad. Are you sad because you fell down? Are you sad because did somebody take your toy? Why are you sad? And ask them. Don't make an assumption. And, what is true is saying you could say you're going to be okay, because the fact of the matter is, like, eventually everybody's going to be okay, unless like they die tomorrow or something, then they're not okay, obviously. But you're going to be okay. But, saying you're okay to a crying child is kind of counterproductive. And again, we want them to be able to be in tune with their feelings, and that doesn't help them be in tune with those feelings. Or maybe they're like, Jordan's mean, I don't like him, I'm not inviting him to my birthday party, something like that. A typical parent or adult or a teacher response might be, oh, you like Jordan, he's your friend. Again, he probably is, how children are, like, somebody's not coming to my birthday party and then they're like hugging each other 5 minutes later. So there is truth in probably the fact that they are going to be friends, but you really still need to validate their feelings and just be like, oh, you're frustrated because Jordan got to the tricycle first, and you really wanted it. Do you want to be next in line, Or, oh, Jordan's mean. What did he say that hurt your feelings, So kind of probing and asking questions about it, and then sort of maybe like, well, do you want to go and talk to him about that? And, wrapping it up that way instead of dismissing the feelings. You don't want to minimize, what they're going through. Or, sometimes children get angry, and parents and adults, parents and teachers sometimes get really scared when children get angry. They feel like, oh my goodness, like, I'm so worried about, like, I can't handle their angry emotions. Or sometimes if a parent wasn't allowed to be angry when they were a child, then that's sort of triggering feelings that they had when they were, like, oh, I wasn't allowed to be angry and I don't know how to handle this, So instead of, you don't want to say, you may not get angry. That's not okay. Like, we're allowed to have our feelings. It's what we do with our feelings is where we need to coach the children, right? So they can have all of their feelings. We need to support them in having all of those feelings, but we need to coach them in how to manage those feelings. So, you want to say, you don't want to say like, oh, you want to say something like, oh, you're so angry that Susan knocked over your blocks, you didn't like that, but I'm still not going to let you hit her, So you want to validate that and also talk about what behaviors are okay and not okay. You also want to try not to get into problem solving everything all the time, actually. And you want to, again, posing questions to them like, do you have an idea on how you can fix that problem? Like, this again works better with the older children. If it's a toddler, you're not going to be doing that. But children who have developed a pretty strong sense of language, that would be a really good way to go. You also, again, don't want to deny what a child is feeling. You want to validate their emotions. I'm hungry. You're not hungry. You're just 8. Instead of that, you might want to be like, oh, you're hungry. Well, we're going to have snack in like 15 minutes, or, oh, you're hungry. What would you like to have right now? So try not to get into like this whole, like, how could you possibly feel that way kind of a thing. And you really want the children to feel what they feel, but not hurt other people. So anyway, just a couple more minutes to wrap up. I know we're supposed to stop in just a minute here. I think I have maybe 2 more minutes or less. So just a little bit of a few tips for building stronger connections with children at home or in the classroom. You want to play with your children and let them take the lead sometimes. So I personally, like, it's funny, like somebody told me once they thought I loved playing with children. And I said, no, I actually really don't. I just know that they like it. So that's why I do it for them sometimes. Like with my daughters when they were little, like I didn't love playing with them, but I did it for them. And so you kind of need to like brace yourself if you're a parent for like, okay, I'm going to sit down 20 minutes a day and play with my child. And I'm not going to control that play. I'm going to let them control the play. And if they can control the play, they're going to be less inclined to try to control other parts of their life that you're trying to guide for them. And they're going to be more receptive to your guidance. So having like 20 minutes a day to sit down and just like, oh, what do you want to play today? And you give them your full present attention, that is going to solve a lot of problems because they felt like you were connecting with them on a level that they chose. It's not like you're saying, oh, let's go to the park. Not that we can go to the park right now, but pretty soon, hopefully. Okay, let's like do an art project or something. Like it doesn't always have to be you initiating it. In fact, it should be them sometimes say, oh, do you want to play? What do you want to play? We can play what you want to do. You want to let the children help you in family life. You want to make sure that they are contributing in the family life or in the classroom life, that they are helping you clean and cook and wash. Particularly children ages like 2 to 6 love helping, and parents sometimes don't want that to happen because they don't do it well. But if they are able to do it for a little while, they get proficient. So that's how they become proficient. And so you want to involve them in your family life, your classroom life, and all that good stuff. You also want to focus on controlling yourself and not your child. So your anger and frustration will feed misbehavior. So like, again, you're going to feel angry and frustrated sometimes, and that's okay. But if you find yourself feeling that way a lot of the time, you are going to have to take a lot of deep breaths, do some meditation, and, sort of like make sure that you are not constantly tense and feeding the negative behavior. I feel like actually sometimes I've known some children who do this. I feel like that my younger daughter was a little bit this way. If I was frustrated, she felt it, and she would purposely do things to trigger me to get frustrated with her, to sort of like almost like relieve the tension. Because if you're kind of silently frustrated, like some children can't handle that, so they will seek to poke into your little spots so that you could have a little explosion, and then there's a sense of relief from that. That's not a terrible thing every once in a while, but you don't want to get into a pattern of that. You want to give attention to the behavior you like and not that you don't like. So again, you don't want to point out every single thing that your child is doing wrong all day long. So that's, again, like negative statements and directives. You want to stay away from doing that all day long. And you want to give attention to the behavior that you do like. You want to redirect and offer positive behavior or pattern interrupters instead of saying no and don't all the time. So a pattern interrupter is like, maybe the child is doing something and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, look at that blue jay in that nest over there. And it's a total random thing. But it will often get the child out of that groove that they're in to go focus on something else and take you out of it instead of you saying no and don't, and there's lots of struggling going on. You also want to follow through. So if you say you're going to do something, if you say something's going to happen, you need to make sure it's going to happen. Otherwise, the children aren't going to listen to you, and they're not going to believe that what you say and what you do are the same. Now, you don't have to be 100% perfectly consistent all the time. That's actually that makes you actually almost too rigid, and it's not humanly possible for most of us. But if you are 85 to 90% of the time consistent, the children will listen to you consistently. If you are 50% consistent, they're going to hedge their bets and they're not going to listen to you. So, because they're like, oh, well, she's not going to follow through with that. So consistency is important. So a last little point to make here is something I kind of just alluded to a minute ago, but it's a quote by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, which is, whatever we put our attention on will grow stronger in our life. So you need to put attention on the positive behavior and the positive interactions. If you are focusing on the negative behavior, oh, he's always doing this, he's always doing that, or why are you always doing this and why are you always doing that? You're going to get more of that. And if you focus on the positive things, then you're going to get more of that. So that's sort of the final point I want to leave everybody at, is like, you know, you have a lot, the way you think about a child, the way you talk about a child, and the way you talk to a child has a lot to do with how the child is going to be. You have a lot of influence here. And so that's actually a little bit of a scary thought for some people, but it's also a great thing to keep in mind and to be conscious of when you are parenting and when you are working with children. So I think we're done now. And now I can look and see all these comments, and they're so wonderful.
Thank you, Letty. That was so helpful. And I, as I'm sure you're reading through the chat, you're seeing that everyone is agreeing with that.
I know. I see a lot of really. This is the biggest cheerleading group I've ever had on a Zoom, I think. You know, yes. Yes, I feel that way too.
I did pull some of the questions for you because you said that you were checking it. So
yes, I'm really kind of like, I'm so sorry. I'm not good at that part. I'm gonna get there.
I get it.
I'm gonna get there.
So Rebecca had a question. She said, how can I help my daughter focus on the work that she's doing, especially because she receives special education classes at school, and now that she's at home, she has a more difficult time to maintain her focus and concentration on her schoolwork. Any effective ideas you can suggest?
Well, as I'm guessing this child might be in elementary. Is that true? Yes. Okay. She said yes. Yay. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind, and this is sort of backtracking a little bit, is this is something I suggest to parents in general, is that when your child is at home and they are focusing on something, could be their Legos, it could be their drawing or whatever you can do as a parent to not interrupt that flow and try to wait until they are, kind of out of the zone and looking up, that kind of helps develop their concentration. We don't realize how often all day long we're pulling them out of the concentration place where we're like, okay, time to eat, time to go to the store, time to do this. And again, sometimes we have to do that. But if there are any times where you can kind of just like stop and go, okay, it's quiet right now and I need her to come to the table, but it could be in 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be this minute. Let me go see if she's busy right now. That will help expand the concentration. I know that's not answering your question exactly yet, but it's sort of a good tip as a preface to like trying to help develop those concentration. The other thing is, like, if it sounds like your daughter might struggle a little bit with some executive functioning, and that is like, how do I make a plan? How do I complete something? How do I start something even? Like, a lot of children struggle with those kinds of things. And so you might actually want to sit down with her and try a few different things. You could try to create a little schedule, or you could even be like, sometimes for some children, like a schedule is overwhelming, even if they're creating it with you. And you could be like, okay, let's just write down the first two steps for you to do today. And when you're done with these 2 steps, then check in with me. And that can kind of help too. Like if you kind of write down the steps that she needs to go through to do things, and maybe she needs okay, what are the steps to getting out all of your work and doing it? You need to go get your pencil. I don't even know what, everybody needs different things these days. Some people are on the computer all the time. So I'm just throwing out examples. You need to get your pencil, get your paper, sit at your desk, work on this for 20 minutes, and then come get me and I will come and tell you what to do next. So, so you might need to do that. Some children really do well if you sit near them. So I'm guessing you're probably working at home while she's working. And if you guys could have desks near each other. Luckily she's 10, so she's not like 4. And she should be able to probably really respect that there are times when you need to have some quietness. So, I mean, that's a little bit of some information that I can share, is like just creating down it step by step. I don't know if you have anything more specific than that, but that's what comes to mind.
Thanks, Letty. And there was another similar question too from Felicia. And Felicia, you can enter in the chat if your question wasn't already answered. But Felicia had asked, I have noticed my son has been shutting down. It's been very hard. Homework at home has been a real struggle. Not sure if you have ways to help with this, maybe ways to set up a work area when it's time for homework. I would like to know how other parents have homework set up for their children so it's comfortable. So I think you touched on that a bit, but I want to also include that question while we're on the topic.
There's a slightly different subtle piece there. And like what I want to address is, again, I've been working with so many parents lately who are dealing with, and teachers dealing with what we're dealing with right now. And we can't overlook the fact that our children are experiencing a traumatic event right now. I mean, it might not feel that way to us, and they may not be expressing it by crying or having a tantrum, but they are going through something really difficult right now. And this is not a normal situation. So there are so many parents and teachers in schools who are just like, we can't just pretend like life is going on as normal right now and just like, oh, we're just schooling at home and we're just going to transfer everything we did there and we're going to go over here, without thinking, without realizing that these kids are experiencing like an immense amount of grief and trauma. From elementary children especially really are social. They want to see their friends. Even the ones that are homeschooling are suffering right now, who have homeschooled like before this, because homeschoolers don't stay home. Like they go see their friends, they go to the park, they go to the museum. Like none of those options are available right now. So I think that parents, if you can, like a lot of parents are just being like, I'm just having my child play, read, or a lot of people are saying I'm having them read in volumes, write in volumes, and keep up with their math practice, like math facts. And if they can do that, I'm not going to do all the stuff that the schools are telling me to do, which, I mean, here I am telling you to do something like rebellious, I guess, in some ways. You have to also think that you realize that your child is going through something really significant right now, and they're not going to be able to produce or perform the way that they normally do. Just like when you have like something crazy going on in your life and you're going through like a death or a divorce or something, you're not at your highest level of performance. So we have to lower our expectations and also really focus on building relationships with the children and the social and the emotional. If you are just sitting down and talking about, we need to get our homework done and blah, 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 and your schoolwork, blah, 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 and you're not asking like, oh, what was your favorite character in that movie that you were watching? Or how's Johnny doing? You talked to him on the phone earlier today, and, or what are you excited about when we get to like, leave the pandemic and go out in the world again? If you are like really reaching into their heart, then they are going to be more responsive to do like the schoolwork. But if you're like stressing about, oh my gosh, they got to get their schoolwork done. Okay, this isn't the end of the world. Nobody's not going to get into Harvard or Yale or wherever if they were kind of sitting around doing nothing for the next 2 or 3 months. There are lots of children who unschool and they don't do it much at all, and they end up they're quite successful. I worked with lots of homeschoolers who are unschoolers. So you have to take the pressure off yourself a little bit and off of them. If like things are not working so well, just like ease up a little bit. Because again, you didn't choose this. Like most parents who are doing this didn't choose this. We're stuck in this right now. Even if you did choose like homeschooling at some point, it wouldn't look like this because you would not be confined to your house. So anyway, just being really gentle with yourself is important, and setting up a little station and having your child, elementary children have a lot of input, so you can collaborate with them. Okay, you have this work to do. What's the best way that you think you can get it done during the day? Where would you like to sit? Like, do you have some ideas that will, help you get through this, that we can work through, because you really need to reach into them. And, elementary kids often have better ideas than we do. I was an elementary teacher, and sometimes I would be like, how are we going to solve this problem? And I would bring it to the group of kids. And I'm telling you, 2 or 3 of them had better ideas than anything I ever came up with. So don't forget the power of asking your child what they want and need, and collaborating with them and experimenting, let's try this, and then we can try something different if that doesn't work. So yeah, that's pretty much it for that.
Thank you. And there was one more question from Kelsey.
Okay.
At least I saw. I'll double check the chat, but I think unfortunately, have only time for one more question. Kelsey,
okay, well, I do see one over here too that I can answer kind of quickly, I think.
Oh, perfect. Once you start there, and then.
Okay, well, it is from Melly, I think. I've always used the iMessage to deal with to deal with negative behavior. At what age do you think it's important to recommend start using this strategy? I actually think when they start talking, you can model it. If they are like, you this blah blah, want water, they're like, whatever, a year and a half. You say, oh, you want some water, when you can say, I want some water too. So you start modeling it early on, as early as like 18 months, but when they're talking 2, 2.5, 3, you can, like, if they're like, you blah blah blah, you can say, oh, are you trying to say I want you to stop hitting me? I want you to bring me I want you to speak to me in nice words. So you kind of rephrase it, and you kind of sportscast it, and then you rephrase it. So yeah. Okay, and what's the next question that you had
Great.
there, Barbara?
Thanks. Yeah. So Kelsey was asking, how can you effectively protect the feelings of the child who they are saying they don't want to be friends with anymore, while still validating the emotions in the moment?
Wait, say that one more time. I think I got it.
Sure, yeah. Kelsey said, how can you effectively protect the feelings of the child who say they are saying they don't want to be friends with anymore, or while still validating the emotions in the moment? So, I mean, if they're sitting there and both of the kids are there, and it's like, I don't want to be your friend, and yeah, that's very painful for another kid to say. Then I, as the adult, would say, oh, are you feeling mad at him right now? And you wish that he would do this or that instead, and so I would try to rephrase it to, so you're feeling mad. And so, and then I start taking the focus in that direction. So they did say it, and the other child heard it, and it probably is painful. But at the same time, we can't protect children from hearing painful things all the time either. It's kind of okay, and then later on I would point out, oh, I remember when you were so mad, you didn't want to be their friend. And I'm so glad that you guys are, feeling really connected right now. And I would say that in front of both of them. So the other child, so they kind of hear that like, oh, yeah, he said he didn't want to be my friend, but it's different now. That's not really necessarily the case. And that was how it was in the moment, so. I don't say, oh, that's not true. He's not your friend. I mean, he is your friend. I actually wouldn't invalidate that feeling, because it is a feeling that they just are not, they're not nuanced enough to really express in the right way yet. So,
Okay, I think you guys are ready. You guys have your next one is ready to go now, pretty much, don't you?
Thank you so much, Letty. That was so helpful. You have so much knowledge to share, and I know everyone appreciated everything you had to
Oh, I'm so
share
glad.
today. So we were so thrilled to have you.
Well, it was really nice to be here, and I'm glad that it was helpful, and it was really nice to see you all.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Letty. Appreciate you being a part of the conference here.
You're welcome. Do I leave the meeting or do you? I'm not sure what I do at the
Oh, yeah. I'll stop your video and you can then leave the meeting. Yep.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Okay.
So nice.
Well, we're going to transition here. So if you are wanting to be a part of the Spanish presentation, it is on a separate Zoom call. I posted it a few minutes ago, but we have so many great comments and thank yous. I'm going to post it again so that everyone can see it. So you can use that link to go to the Spanish session, the Spanish presentation, if you would like to hear Rafa Roman, who will be presenting on that line. And over here on this current line, we'll be continuing with Elizabeth Campbell. And that Spanish session is available on Zoom, and it's also available on the opendoormontessori.com/conference webpage, and you can log on and see it streaming live on YouTube Live. So I'm going to turn it back over to Barbara, who's going to introduce Elizabeth.
Great. Thanks, Chris. All right, so I see Elizabeth's on the panel. I'm going to pull up her bio here to see if her video turned on. So Liz and I, well, I call her Liz, but Elizabeth, I should say, taught together. And we have a an even special relationship because I taught Liz's son, and so we just that always and oh, give me 1 minute. Hold on, sorry. Okay, sorry, I had to help my child. So Elizabeth, yeah, we were toddler teachers together, and she really taught me so much about different ways to apply Montessori, and we just had a really special relationship, and I just really enjoyed teaching her son, and boy, do I miss them. So anyways, about Liz, enough about me. Elizabeth Campbell was born and raised in New Jersey and is currently teaching in a toddler classroom in Key West, Florida. Lucky Liz. She holds a BS in early childhood education from Boston University and an AMS infant toddler Montessori credential from Village Training Center in Miami, Florida. In addition to teaching toddlers, Elizabeth has taught at 2 accredited Montessori teacher training schools in Miami and Nashville, and has presented on toddler-related topics at various Montessori conferences in the U.S., including the annual AMS Montessori event. She just completed her Emerging Leaders Fellowship with the American Montessori Society and looks forward to continuing to share her experiences in toddler classroom with other passionate, driven, and dedicated teachers. Elizabeth has an infectious laugh, an intense love of coffee, and an innate desire to make her hair bigger than the day before. And today, Elizabeth will be talking about Follow the Child. Follow the Child is in a toddler environment. Follow the child is a cornerstone belief of the Montessori pedagogy, but what does that mean, and how do we best follow the child in a toddler environment? Join Liz as she breaks down the essential components that enable the teacher to enter the classroom with the children in order to let the learning unfold naturally and the magical Montessori moments multiply. So that just sounds fabulous. We're so happy to have you here. It's so great to see you, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. I first want to say thank you to the conference. This has just been such a joy to be a part of it and watch it every day. I want to thank everybody who's here today. You are my people, and you are rock stars. You were rock stars before the quarantine, and you are rock stars now, figuring out how to do what we do from our own homes. So make sure you give yourself a pat on the back. I am learning technology. We're getting to be friends, I don't think we got along before, but I'm easing into it. So join me as I figure this all out. And I'd also love just a bit of grace in terms of I've given my family a sweet, gentle reminder that mommy is currently doing something important and for them to stay quiet. So I've kind of given them the mom eyes and the gentle, loving reminders. So there might be noises in the background, but I've asked them to try to keep it at a minimum. So that being said, I'm also trying to figure out how to do the chat while maintaining the presentation. So bear with me as that happens. It might just end up being that I refer to it at the end. So I would love for you first in the chat, before I switch my screen over, to see how many of us are infant and toddler teachers here, or if we're admin, just so I can get a sense of who's here today. And then I'm gonna start to share my screen with everybody. Here we go. So, ooh, let's see. I think I can get the chat up while we're, Anyway, we'll see if I can manage dual duties together at the same time, right? So we're gonna go into following the child in a toddler environment. But first, what I'm gonna have us do is we're gonna come together to this space where we're gonna start with something that we do in my classroom on a daily basis with the toddlers, because it helps ground everybody and bring everybody together. So I'd like to introduce you to V, who's going to be doing it for us today.
I offer you peace. I offer you love. I offer you friendship. I see your beauty. I hear your need. I feel your feelings. A wisdom flows from a higher source, and I salute that source. And I salute that source in you.
So I second what she says. I salute that source in you. So many of us are infant toddler teachers here. And I think there's a quote that resonates with a lot of early childhood educators. And it's, there are so many who hold, as I do, that the most important period of life is not the age of university studies, but the first one, the period from birth to the age of 6. For that is a time when man's intelligence itself, his greatest implement, is being formed. But not only his intelligence, the full totality of his psychic powers. That's a really heavy statement from Dr. Montessori, right, guys? It's the foundation of learning is happening in 0 to 6, and the foundation of yourself, who you're gonna be for the rest of your life, is happening from 0 to 6. That's daunting and beautiful all at the same time. And what a privilege we have to be a part of it. And I think recently we've all been given another daunting task, which is how do we transition this to being at home and trying to do what we do with toddlers, but through a computer. And so as we kind of got there, you can see some of the teachers from our school, you can see in our faces like, oh, this is a task. And there's my daughter trying to connect with her teacher through Zoom. And then I've been using this new app called Marco Polo. Maybe it's just new to me. But I've been using it to talk to my people, and the conversations that we were having was this back and forth about like how hard this is for infant and toddler teachers, right? It's like the struggle feels even deeper, even more difficult. And we were trying to figure out like what that is and why does it feel even more foreign to us. And the words that we kept saying to ourselves were, what we do in the classroom is organic and spontaneous and reflective and responsive. And that is how we connect with the toddlers, right? That's how we reach them. It's a moment to moment type of relationship. And we use them as cues for how to respond. And we are with them, they are not with us, which is why this whole new thing is really weird, right? And so I thought it would be really relevant to start talking about and reflecting back on practices that we use in the classroom so that when we get back to the classroom, we can heighten all of those experiences that we have with the toddlers, right? So when I want to start off, I want to introduce you to one of my friends. And please know I got permission from all of my parents to use images of their children in this presentation for you guys today. And I prefaced it with, these images, I think, will help solidify and internalize everything we're talking about today, because you can see it all over their faces, right? So this is W. And W she runs at 150% all the time. That is who she is, right? She has all of her feelings all at the same time. And she uses her entire body all the time. She is like a beautiful butterfly that flits through the room. So this, I believe, is my most favorite day of teaching ever, was being present with her on this day. So she began by painting at the easel. And then she started to paint her hands. And then she asked for more paint because the cup was empty. And then she started to paint her hands. And just because her face is close to her hands as she's doing this, you can see it starting to transfer to more places on her body. And she was so focused and had such intention with everything that she was doing. You could see her internalizing this experience and feeling it with her whole body. And then it moved on. So she needed more paint, and it moved to her legs, and it moved to her feet. And she would just rub up and down and up and down, and more paint, Miss Liz, more paint. And friends would come and go, right? They'd watch, and I worked to protect the space and to protect her experience, because I knew, you could feel it, that this was gonna mean something to her, right? She was doing this for a reason. This meant something to her. So when she felt satisfied, we just looked at each other, and she knew what she needed to do next, and I knew what she needed to do next. And I just gently guided her with some cues, right? It became an extension activity. So now she went from sensory experiences with the paint to having to figure out how to get the paint off of her body. And she is very independent and was working very hard, and we tried baby wipes and that wasn't working. And so then we're at the sink and we're doing that. And we're realizing this is also not gonna cut it. So I said, do you think maybe you need a hose? Thrilled. She was thrilled. So then we went outside and we used the hose, and it was on a gentle spritz, and I sang to her as I sprayed her down because it needed to still be this beautiful experience, not a hosing down of a child, right? But you can see on her face the joy, right? It's contagious. And then after we came back inside from cleaning her body, she extended the activity even more and went into the bathroom and started to wash her hair. She did this for an hour and a half. The beautiful butterfly that flits around the room, focused with purpose for an hour and a half. The next day, she did it again. This time, not for an hour and a half, it was about 45 minutes, the whole process again. Enough that we needed to use the hose again. And I had told my assistant the day before, I have a feeling she's gonna do this again. So we need to protect this experience for her. And you know how kids love to repeat. So she did it the second day. Then she did it a third day. This time, only 15 minutes. But what I wanted to use this as is, to me, it kind of encompasses exactly what we're talking about today, which is follow the child. I feel like it was a visual representation of follow the child. And we hear that phrase all the time, right? It's almost like our Montessori catchphrase. And we're putting it on everything and we say it, but it could be misinterpreted or misunderstood or mean different things to different people. And so I started to try to look back as like, where did it originate from, right? Like, when did Dr. Montessori say this? And so I went to the source, and this is the one time it's found mentioned in her text, right? But it doesn't really give you steps to follow to then go follow the child. It's more like this big picture belief that encompasses the entire philosophy. So then I kept going, like, how do we use this? And this is the quote that I found that I think best personifies what we would want to say follow the child is. Oh, sorry, we'll go back. And this is the one that spoke to me. But then I keep thinking, is it enough? Like, is this enough in the toddler environment? And so I want to bring back those words that we were talking about at the beginning. organic and spontaneous and reflective and responsive. And we need to get to that place, right? Where we're in the classroom and we can be those things, but we need to do work beforehand so that we can be fully present and in the moment, so that we can give support and experiences to the toddlers, the experiences that they need to self-construct themselves. Well, how do we reach that? How do we get to the place where we can follow them into the present moment? And I argue that we can break it down into these three things: preparation of the environment, preparation of self, and the power of observation. So here we go. Come with me on this journey. So the preparation of the environment, and who do we go to figure out how do we prepare the environment? Well, Dr. Montessori. And I want us to focus on these three things under preparation of the environment, which would be the sensitive periods, our universal tendencies, and purposeful and authentic materials. So first, a lot of us are very familiar with the sensitive periods. It's drilled into us in training, right? Sorry, I just keep checking because I'm like, I see flashes on the screen and flashes on my phone, and I just want to make sure this is all good still. So the sensitive periods are these moments in development where children are more likely to absorb the information, right? And this graph shows some of them. I think it's hard to read on some of them. But with our friends in the toddler environment, there's language and movement and order, and my favorite ones are like fragile and tiny objects, right? And which is why we give them glass and porcelain and pottery in the classroom, because this is the time where they can learn to take care of those objects because they're in the sensitive period for that. So we need to use this to help guide us in how we prepare our environment so that we can focus on those sensitive periods. Now, this is my favorite. I don't know what happened in my training, but it like called to me and resonated with me. And I've seen through my experience talking to other educators, other Montessorians who maybe are elementary and they might not have heard of these. So there's 11 universal human tendencies that Dr. Montessori studied for all people, all cultures, all ages. We all fall into these our entire lives. And if you go and start looking through the list, maybe it'll start to like resonate with you too, right? And I want you to think about yourself first. So which ones are you drawn to on a daily basis? And maybe even more recently, since the quarantine. Are there some of these that you are seeing yourself do more of? For instance, have you adjusted your point of orientation, your need for orientation? We used to do this from school. Now we're doing it from home. Have you created an orientation point for yourself in your home that is your new school? This is mine, which is why for this session, I came here to, it's like a hug because it makes me feel safe and comforted. Have you maybe started to reorganize cabinets in your house, pulled out old stuff because you're trying to find order in the chaos? Are you trying to ground yourself with more handwork, right? Because hands need handwork. I know a lot of people are buying out all of the active dry yeast at the supermarket because we are getting back into bread baking, or sewing. We're using our hands again. So now I want you to think about this with the children and go back to the time you spent with them in the classroom. Do they repeat over and over and over again? Mm-hmm. Do they need a point of orientation or a sense of order in the classroom so that they can make sense of the world around them? So the language works are always on the language shelf. You did not switch them and then put them somewhere else, because they need to know where the things go so that they can go get them and put them back. Have you ever put out a lesson and then the child lines up all the pieces? Or the intent of the lesson was one thing, but now they're sorting it by color. Or they've taken one object that's this color and they've gone and matched it to somewhere else in the classroom because they're making abstractions, right? They're starting to make connections between things. And if we have all of these things working for us in the classroom, we can move from one stage of development to another. But again, this is our whole lives. But we want to use this in the classroom to help figure out what we put into the classroom. So then we need purposeful and authentic materials. So I know sometimes, which I take deep breaths because it's hard for me to stomach, people refer to toddler, the toddler environment, Montessori toddler, as like an afterthought of Montessori. And I'm working through that. But we all know that we are not a primary prep program, right? We are our own entity that has its own purposeful and authentic materials that need to be included in our classrooms. And they were developed by Montessori and Montanaro and Gnocchi, right? They used thoughtful choices and scientific-based research to figure out what needs to be in these spaces for these young children. And they're in the absorbent mind, right? But they're also concrete thinkers. So what we need to do is we need to give them real experiences so that they are acquiring knowledge about the world. So a lot of our stuff is grounded in practical life, exploration and experience, not mastery. That is for 3 to 6, right? We are exploration, experience. So instead of providing perhaps a play kitchen in our classrooms, we're providing real cooking experiences. It is purposeful and authentic. They are baking because we are going to eat, right? So the classroom is full of practical life tools to take care of themselves, to take care of that space. And when we're providing language materials, it is real objects. Yes, there are other like variants of our language shelves, right? I'm not saying that everything has to be a real object. But what I'm saying is, if we want to do pouring, we are pouring because there is a purpose behind it. We are pouring because we are thirsty and we need to get a drink of water. Or we are using tongs because we are transferring food. Now, are there some exceptions? Yes? If we see that the child and or children need more opportunities to use that work, we can tell through our observations that they need more opportunities to tong, because that is what is driving them right now. Then we will put out a pair of tongs with a sorting lesson to heighten that work, right? But we're gonna start with the purposeful way to use tongs. So I wanted to break down some lessons just so that you could see it in relation to sensitive periods, human tendencies, and the purposeful, authentic side of the work. So there's a photograph of the water dispenser that we have in our classroom with a tray of cups that they have to use to get water when they are thirsty. To the right is a Play-Doh lesson that can also be used with natural clay. And the one in the center is the mystery bag with related objects, and this one is real materials related to going to the doctor. And I'll just break that one down for you. So in terms of that particular lesson, it is addressing the sensitive periods of language and small objects. It is addressing the human tendencies of order, exploration, communication, repetition, and work with the hands. And then the purposeful part of it is that they're acquiring language and understanding world concepts. So then we move on to preparation of self, because that's important. And Dr. Montessori writes, an ordinary teacher cannot be transformed into a Montessori teacher, but must be created now, having rid herself of pedagogical prejudices. The first step is self-preparation of the imagination, for the Montessori teacher has to visualize a child who is not yet there, materially speaking, and must have faith in the child who will reveal himself through work. So this is a picture of baby Liz when she's graduating from college, thinking she is the jam, right? I started to work in a public school, and I thought, yeah, I am ready, I've got this. And when I transitioned into being a Montessori teacher, it wasn't as smooth as I wanted it to be. It was very humbling. It was painful at times. You could say I broke multiple times through the process and built a new version of myself. But maybe we want to say actually that we were rediscovering our true selves. If we're parroting back to Annie yesterday, right? Like becoming who we once were before the world told us any different. So you're this new version of yourself. And for the purpose of our talk today, I just want to go to looking at where do we, you, draw the line. What are your nails on the chalkboard? And what are the rules you have in your classroom? So for instance, my draw the line full stop is I do not have primary materials in a toddler classroom. That was drilled into me in my training. And if a child is ready and needing primary materials, they're ready for primary. So that's my hard line that I won't cross. An example of nails on a chalkboard, right? Like what gives you the ickies that you're sitting in there? Some people it's like dirt. So I've heard toddler teachers like not putting plants in their classroom because the fear of like the dirt on the floor. I had an assistant one year and hers was running water. It was too much for her, the running water. But you know our children love water, and we need to let them. So we had to come to a compromise that it was like, well, we'll turn down the water to like a trickle. But that was what gave her the cringy moment. So you have to reflect on that. And why is that? And what can I do to address that? And then what are the rules of the classroom? And what I like to look at that is more of the word boundaries. And what I love is the bridge analogy, right? So you're wanting to go explore and see something new on the other side of that bridge, right? But the bridge is over water. This bridge is rickety, and you feel a little insecure. What a boundary can give you, it's like a handrail on the bridge, right? And once you have that handrail, all of a sudden you feel a little more safe. You got comfort, gives you order and reliability and structure. And now all of a sudden you're ready to go explore that other side. But at the same time, if you set too many boundaries in your classroom, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to start limiting the growth of the children in the classroom. So you got to think about what your rules or your boundaries are in your classroom, and what mine are what I refer to as the 3 Ds. So the 3 Ds are dangerous, disrespectful, and disruptive. Those are the only times I'm going to step in. Dangerous, disrespectful, disruptive. And it's harder said than done, because you will realize that you have a tendency to step in way more than those 3 Ds. And that's when you have to do a lot of self-reflection. You have to question the things that you've been doing or what you've been taught. And then you need to be curious and open, because those things will change as you grow as a teacher. So they will change from year to year. They will change from day to day. But we have to constantly and consistently reflect, question, be curious, and be open about those hard lines, those cringy moments, and those rules that we have. So then I want to hit up observation, because we're getting so close. This is me fangirling out to another Montessorian, because who doesn't love to fan out to other Montessorians? And I love this quote from Simone Davies. So, observation. We remember to see who they are, not who we want them to be. We see them with new eyes as they are developing every day, every hour, every minute. And instead of coming with the idea of what we want to teach them, they show us what they want to learn, and then we see how we support that. Right? Yes, everything, everything. So let's dive into our observational practices and start to reflect on them. How often are you observing? So I went to a conference and I heard a toddler teacher say, I sit down in my classroom every day the minute I walk into the classroom. And I was like, that's impossible. But I had faith. And so immediately upon the next day of returning to school after this conference, that's what I said. I said, I'm scared, I don't want to do it, but I'm gonna. So then immediately upon entering the classroom with the students, I would sit on that bench and I would sit there with my clipboard for as long as I possibly could. Some days it is long. Some days it is not. But it often taught me more about myself in that process. Like, what is it that's making me get off that bench? And why? And do I really need to? Because I think I can sit here longer. So yeah, are you doing this every day? Because we should be. Whether or not you're sitting and taking the moment, you need to be observing somehow every day. Who are you observing? And I ask this because sometimes we need to realize that maybe we're missing some friends because we're observing the ones who need to be seen. So sometimes using all of that documentation can show like, oh, I'm constantly being drawn to this person and I don't remember what this person did today. And what tools are you using to do that observation? So I wanted to quickly just show you some of the things that I use in my classroom. So I've made a 2-week sheet for every child that then when they're napping, I'm writing stuff down. As you can see in this one picture, I've also done a map of my classroom, which I absolutely love as a tool. So I'll sit there and I will start to where I'll pick a child and then I'll follow them with my pen just to see where they go to and how long they go to and where are they moving and how often are they moving. And you get to see these like travel patterns in your classroom. Another tool that I have found to be so helpful when I'm sitting on that bench is using Avery labels on a sheet, right? So I can quickly jot down, V is doing this, W is doing this, and then at nap time, I peel those labels off and I add them to their individual sheets. So I don't need to have every single thing and flipping back and forth and flipping back and forth. This provides me the space and time and ease to write down those things in the moment. And the other tool that I've used this year, which has been so fantastic with my assistant, is this other sheet you can see in the picture. Their names are all on the left, and then the days of the week follow. And at the end of every day, we reflect together. And there's something that we can work on together as a goal for that friend for the next day, because they're not giving presentations. So I can't say, I want to work on hand washing, but how does that help my assistant help them? So these are goals like pushing down pants in the bathroom or using kind words. So what I thought right now is that we could do some following of the child. Okay, so this is T. T is adventurous, she's a risk taker, she's driven by movement and maximum effort. And we had just built this fort on our playground. And it's 2 feet off the ground around a tree. It was full of excitement and love for all these children, right? They loved it. There's a railing and they wanted to climb over the railing. And we had a rule that that was not an option. But they kept wanting to do it, especially T. So we had to sit down and be reflective about what they're showing us and what they need. She needs this, right? She's showing me she needs to climb. But how do we adjust it for her to be safe? So we modified the rules. There's no standing on the railing. There's a way to get over it. But look, she did that. She earned that. She learned something about herself and her abilities because we didn't hinder what she needed. She showed us that's what she needed. And so we needed to figure out how can we give that to her in a safe way. So we were right there, just in case, guiding her through it. But look at the joy. That's her turning around because she did it. So this is H. H is a Montessori teacher in a tiny body. She is also half teenager. She is curious and she loves making connections between things. So she's making new discoveries about herself and the world every day. She's also loving being a leader in the classroom. That's the Montessori teacher in her. She is giving presentations of the lessons to the younger children. She's loving the hands-on work and the exploration. But she also likes to make connections. So one day she's working with the glue box in the art area and she's using it. And then I turn and this is what she's doing. Now she has made the connection that that tiny little jar of glue with the brush in it looks like nail polish, and she's going to paint her nails. Do I stop her? She's making those abstractions. She's connecting parts of her world together. Is she breaking any of the 3 rules? Is she being dangerous, disruptive, or disrespectful? She's learning. This is C. C is a Montessori child through and through. He loves order and he relies on that. His dad recently had been accepted to be a firefighter. So he was going to go to firefighter school and he was going to be gone all day long. And that was going to fully disrupt his sense of order. So how can I help him? How can I follow him? So I created language lessons to help immerse him in this new world to make him feel more comfort. So I made language cards and I brought out models. He used this work every day. Every day. And this gave him a sense of comfort. So then his family was going to have a baby. And I thought, okay, so this technique worked. How can I help him? Because a baby is different level, right? And I had to adapt and reflect on a rule that I have in my classroom, which was I don't have baby dolls in the classroom. I used to, because I thought, oh, that gives practice to the students to to put on clothes. But then I thought, well, the purposeful way to put on clothes is to put on clothes. So I took the baby doll away. But for this, I started to say, you know what? This is what he needs. So we changed our cloth washing station into a diaper changing station. All the real materials, gloves, wipes, diapers, so that he could immerse himself in that and get ready. So what if we didn't follow the child? What would happen? What if we didn't rely on all of these different aspects? How would that influence their growth? How would that change them? Go back to W. What if I had intervened in all of these experiences? What if I told her no? What if I stopped her from that internal drive that she had? Would she be able to do these things? Would she be able to accomplish those things, or empathize with friends, or feel that sense of accomplishment, or learn about her body? Would she have gotten what she needed to construct herself? So I end this with my hope for all of you. In this time where we can reflect and grow, I want you to look backwards and I want you to look forwards. I want you to look back on your practices. How are you using all of those? How are you following the toddler? And get curious and ask yourself questions and challenge yourself. And the one thing that I know is that quarantine has taught us that we can do hard things. We are not meant to teach children over the computer, but we are figuring out how to do it. So if baking bread scares you, because it scares me, I'll make banana bread and scuffins, but kneading bread scares me. I'm gonna challenge myself. On Friday, that's what I'm learning how to do with the students. So I wanna end with another mantra that we do in our classroom, which helps me get present.
Right here, right now, open. Here comes school, comes. Here I am, right here, right now, open.
That was very nice.
So I end with that. Here I am, right here, right now, open. And I hope that you are too. And I know I didn't leave us a lot of time for questions, and I'm sorry, but if there are any, and I haven't seen the chat because I seriously, like I told you, I don't know how to do this.
Thanks, Liz. That was so great. It was, I loved all the information and how you presented it. I think there was a question that we'll get to. I loved the part about, you know, the preparation of the teacher and that self-reflection. It's such an important process, and I appreciate you being raw about it too, and, you know, opening to say that it wasn't easy. And we've, you know, and I think that's such an important part to remember, that it will feel, you know, like there will be parts of like your education journey that, you know, do challenge you and force you to look at things from different angles that you didn't do before. And that can make you, you know, feel vulnerable, and it's just not, you know, it's like you said, it's not easy. And when I didn't have the eloquence to give you a proper introduction due to tiny humans in my household. However, that part really resonated with me, because I remember, you know, getting my Montessori certification and thinking, okay, I got it and I know it. And it's when I was introduced to you and you came into the classroom, you're like, you have a pink tower in your classroom. and at the time, you know, we had such a respectful relationship, and I remember thinking, I get it, that's cool, like whatever. And now I've learned, and you grow so much, and I've always kept that in my mind. And I think if we all as educators can have this mindset of being open and learning from each other, and then taking that with us and continuing that learning, is just, you know, it was one of the most important lessons I ever received as an educator, and I can only thank you for that. So not about the pink tower in itself, but about that bigger picture of like, this is a journey, and we truly call it a journey for that reason. And we have to remember that we're not going to learn everything overnight, and things are going to resonate with us different parts of that journey, and we have to be open to it, and we have to be forgiving to ourselves. So I just feel that it's so meaningful at a time like this, and I had to comment. I had to be selfish and comment on that.
Well, I need to reciprocate, because there was something that you told me. So as I was curious and questioning, you said something so powerful to me that changed things, that now I say to anyone who comes into my classroom to observe, or a new assistant joins the staff, I will say to them, question me, right? Like, ask me questions, because I either will get the opportunity to A, talk about Montessori, right, and go back to my roots and explain it to you, or B, I now have a new set of eyes that's like, yeah, why do I do that?
Yeah.
And I can go, oh, I just do that because that's what I thought, or that's just, oh, and then you have to go back and like either have justification or change it. And so I try to use that as like a welcoming, like, please, I need you to do that. And I learned that from you, ma'am. So I thank you.
I didn't even know. But yeah, Jill puts in the chat here, peer coaching. It's the best tool you can have within a community. Not the best. It is a very powerful tool that you can have within a community. But there was a question that I think was so great. Kelsey, you had asked about the parents. You know, I think you were on the slide where your friend was covered in paint, and Kelsey wrote in at that time, how did you explain this to the parents? Some of my students' parents don't even want me braiding their hair because they don't want them looking different when they picked up. And I think that was a really valid and great question from Kelsey.
Oh yes, right? So I know that oftentimes at the beginning of the year, we give illicit instructions kind of in a handbook of sorts, like make sure they're only coming to school in clothes that you're okay with them getting dirty in. So we preface the year with that. But on that day, with that experience, she went home with a bag full of clothes that were covered in blue paint, along with her skin tinted in a color of blue that was going to require some heavy duty bathing. And so I used that opportunity to share with the parent exactly how I interpreted that entire situation and what that meant for her in that day. So an email went out during nap with accompanying photographs to be like, this is what you're gonna see when you come home today. And this was, and I literally said it, this was the best day of my teaching career, to be a part of this and to see her do this, because this is what that experience gave her. And I think it helped them see it through our eyes, right? Because otherwise they would see it as a bag of paint that they have to deal with, instead of an experience that their child walked away with. So I think that's part of our responsibility, right? Is to show the parents how we see the kids and in how they experience those moments. I hope that helps.
Thank you. There's another question here. That was wonderful, Elizabeth. I really love the idea of authentic materials. I saw a lot of glass in your materials in your classroom. How do you manage the safety since toddler children are still quite clumsy playing with them?
Oh, for sure. They break, you know, and I think that's part of that reflectiveness that you have to have about yourself. So you have to know they're gonna break. You're modeling how to carry those fragile materials in the classroom. And when they do break, that actually is solidifying the idea that those materials are fragile. So you know how we have to make mistakes to learn the lesson? So sometimes we're not going to learn it until we do break it. But when they do break, I would say to you that you have to respond with kindness and love and not go like, stay, everybody stop, nobody move. Because that is not how we respond. It's like, oh, I heard something. I heard something break. We need to be safe with our bodies. Can you move back? Miss Liz is going to go get the dustpan and brush. Could you help go get the dustpan and brush or the trash can? And then you're showing them how you take care of those things. Obviously, don't put out your grandmother's china in your Montessori classroom because it will not survive. And you have to have multiple of things, but you have to give them those things in order for them to learn. And once that happens one time, it might not happen again for a very, very long time, and you will see them carefully bringing those objects around. I hope that inspires you to start putting more of those things into your classroom.
Yes.
I think this is our time. I'm sorry I talked so long today, but I love this, and I'm so thankful, and I'm thankful for everybody for being here and for you, and this has just been, now I can breathe, but this is so great.
Thank you, Liz. That was phenomenal, and we learned so much. And yes, thank you for being a part of it and sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. That was incredible. I so enjoyed hearing your presentation. I'm so glad that you could be part of the event today. Well, thanks everybody for being on our session today for Songs of Hope. Hope you enjoyed the speakers. I know I certainly did here. Just every day is a wonderful addition of knowledge here, listening to Letty speak earlier and Liz now. Such great tools that we can use in our classrooms and our homes. So I want to encourage you to continue and come back tomorrow, where we'll be featuring speakers Dinesh Advani, CEO of a very interesting technology company for children that develops music-based cultural content for children. And then we'll have Bobby Del Vecchio, who's a dear friend of mine, former drummer for Chuck Berry and the Dave Clark Five and many other incredible classic rock bands from the 60s, 70s, 80s and on. And then our Spanish session will be from Maria Artaco, who will be presenting at 1 p.m. and we'll be using the same Zoom line as we did today for her session. So thanks so much for being a part of the Songs of Hope conference. We wish you a great afternoon and evening, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.